Some international filmmakers hit the Hollywood market in a big way.
South Korean director Bong Joon-ho won the Academy Award for Best Picture with his 2019 film Parasite, and it made waves as a foreign language film, winning in that category. For English speakers who don't hate subtitles, it was hailed as an amazing accomplishment in visual storytelling. The subject of this video is not Bong Joon-ho, but another Best Picture winning director, Guillermo del Toro.
I was doing the thing where you draw parallels between the careers of two people to make a point later on.
Guillermo del Toro began his filmmaking career in 1993 with Cronos. Since that debut, he has balanced his career by making some films outside the Hollywood system as joint productions of Spain and Mexico, while periodically sprinkling in massive Hollywood blockbusters like the comic book superhero-style Blade 2 and Hellboy. Then more recently, his own Academy Award winner with The Shape of Water, a movie about a woman and a very f***able fish man in the Cold War.
Now I know what you're thinking. Why do you want to that fish? All I can say is, in my notes for this section, I just put, I've always loved fish sticks with tartar sauce.
His body of work is massive and filled with a lot of hits, both foreign-produced and Hollywood-produced. His genre is often labeled horror, though his films range from superhero films to monster movies and even to love stories. Many of his films can be picked apart to find similar threads running through them. Among the most salient aspects of his career are his use of film, both foreign and domestic, to tell stories about accepting outsiders, his blending of history into his most fantastical films to enrich the understanding of his viewers, and his unique aesthetic that is a mashup of styles and influences from around the world, and which set him apart from the visual style of basically everyone. His career shows the intense value of a broad perspective in filmmaking. It does not take much effort to look through his filmography to find examples of a narrative that can be read as an immigrant story, or more specifically, a story about accepting the other or unfamiliar beings that do not look like us instead of maligning them as evil.
It is, in fact, from what I've seen, the most commonly talked about narrative thread in his work. I'm not breaking any new ground by bringing it up here. As a Mexican immigrant himself, this narrative is a very personal one. He moved his family to the United States after the kidnapping of his father in 1997. He has actually said in the past that he believes himself to be an unwilling exile from his own country. Existing as an immigrant in a country that is often hostile to people who look like him, Del Toro creates beautiful stories about overcoming fear of outsiders and even coming to love them.
The Shape of Water is a Cold War-era love story featuring a woman who is something of an outsider in her own society. She falls in love with a fish creature who stands in for the other that creates a feeling of fear in a xenophobic society. In the film's time period, fear was an everyday American experience, but the suspicious nature of Americans to people deemed outsiders was not new at the time, and it for sure did not go away when the Cold War ended. The director himself is acutely aware that his presence has often been perceived as the other, foreign, alienated, and ostracized, which corresponds to the characteristics of the monsters in his work.
Del Toro isn't the only person in the business to tell these types of stories, but in the context of his own career, it seems like a particular passion project for him. Each film is the next in a long line of films trying to reach people who would otherwise be closed off to a message like his. When given his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, he made a pretty passionate and powerful speech.
The second thing you need to know is that I'm Mexican. And I am an immigrant. And right now, we are in a moment of great fear and great division, because that's why fear is used. It's used to divide us. It's used to tell us that we're all different, that we shouldn't trust each other. And these lies make us easier to control and make it easier to hate each other. But the antidote to that is to come together, to realize that those divisions are complete fantasies. When people say you dwell in fantasy, I say I don't. Politicians do. Churches do. I don't.
I'll include a link to the full video in the description because it's pretty powerful to watch the whole thing. I think about it a lot.
Do not believe the lies they tell about us. Believe in the stories you have inside, and believe that we all can make a difference, and we all have stories to tell, and we all can contribute to the art and the craft and the world in any way we see fit.
I really do think about it a lot. I just think about his work a lot. I even have these tarot cards to look at when I'm not like watching his movies or rereading The Strain or something. Look who's the devil. The pale man is the hermit. The use of a medium like film to address the fears of the nation is not a new phenomenon, though it seems of particular importance to this director. Repeatedly, Del Toro lays bare the idea that what people fear is often someone just like them, someone who simply wants to be accepted and loved.
In Hellboy, the titular character is a half-demon who, much like my 2013 Tumblr blog, terrifies normal people. Though his only real purpose in life is to protect them from various occult dangers that only he and his friends are capable of fighting.
The character comes from a series of comics, but it was initially Del Toro's passion for the character and persistence that got the original film greenlit in the first place. He literally tracked people down on sets and just bugged the shit out of them until they said yes. His unique perspective in the American film market contributes to richer stories that ultimately broaden the horizons of his audience. As a writer and director, Guillermo del Toro uses a lot of influences from his Mexican heritage, his eclectic bundle of hobbies and passions, and Spanish history. Two of his biggest splashes in the United States were the Spanish-language films The Devil's Backbone in 2001 and Pan's Labyrinth in 2006. I feel like they need to be mentioned together because they were made as companion pieces to each other. Both films were entirely in Spanish and were also produced completely outside the Hollywood system as joint productions of Spain and Mexico. They also take place in the similar setting of Francoist Spain, which is a setting that not a lot of Americans are going to be intimately familiar with. It is the period of Spanish history that emerged from a time of civil war around 1936. Images of early 20th century fascist dictatorships in American media tend toward primarily showing us Germany. And seeing how it looked in other countries provides a way to round out the viewer's understanding of history.
In Pan's Labyrinth, a young girl named Ophelia and her pregnant mother go to live with the girl's new stepfather, Vidal, an officer in the army, while he battles against a group of rebels. Her fantastical journey of completing 3 tasks to prove herself alongside fairies and monstrous creatures is played out against a backdrop of the vicious fight between her stepfather's soldiers and the local guerrilla forces of the resistance. The creatures Ophelia confronts have parallels to the political landscape around her. Imagery of creatures like the Pale Man beg to be deciphered by audiences, though Americans must learn a little more about Spain's history to do so fully. He is a disgusting creature with white, sagging skin and gaping holes for nostrils and a wide mouth that gives the face a semblance of normalcy, save for the smooth skin where his eyes should be.
Oh, how did that get there? My bad. Wrong photo. They just look so much alike.
Instead, his eyes are in the palms of his hands. He holds them in the air and reaches out to grasp for Ophelia when she makes the mistake of giving in to her temptation. She eats from the banquet at his table against the explicit instructions of the faun. To a casual viewer, the Pale Man may just be a scary creature who devours children. Maybe they think there's more to him. When the camera swings past a pile of children's shoes, paintings on the wall of him eating children, and then it focuses on the lavish table of food before him. Like everything in a Del Toro movie, this imagery is very deliberate. First, he is a representation of the way those in power abuse it to hurt the weak. A fairly universal understanding of the character. Del Toro has said that the monster being a pale man is not a coincidence. That's my Mitch McConnell noise. He is also positioned identically to Vidal at the dinner scene. The secondary purpose of the Pale Man is how he represents the Catholic Church facilitating the rise of fascism. They managed to retain much of their wealth when the entire country was starving, and so were able to keep a full table at the expense of the laymen.
Finally, we come to the undeniable look and feel of a film by Guillermo del Toro. His style is one that is almost entirely unique. It takes from influences of horror, science fiction, monster movies, comic books, and dozens of other small things that only he could personally name.
To get a sense of his personal creative process, they could visit his bizarre bleak house. That is, the house he built specifically for his personal collection of creepy shit that grew too large to be contained in his regular home. He wanted things to be displayed rather than stacked on the floor, and so built a whole house for all of it. Must be nice.
According to him, his wife likes it, but his kids are ambivalent to all of the weird stuff in the house. It comes complete with a rain room, which features a false window that is designed to appear as if a storm outside is battering the window panes, which is a shortcut to the melancholy fantasy worlds in which his movies take place. Mr. Del Toro, if you ever see this, first of all, hi. Love your work. Second of all, can I rent some time in the Rain Room. You don't even have to be there. I just want to hang out in like a creepy gothic world for a while and like write my own scary book or something.
The unique look and feel of a Del Toro film comes from a combination of his cultural background and his love of all sorts of different media forms, the type of which can be seen displayed in his Bleak House. Since childhood, Del Toro has been a consumer of comic books, reveling in the visceral storytelling with which whole stories could be told without the use of words. This love of comics continued into adult life and bleeds into everything he has created. Blending a comic book style into film is important for a man who concerns himself with getting his stories across to an audience who may not be receptive when they cannot understand the words. The influence of his comic book obsession can be seen in Pan's Labyrinth when large portions of the story can be told strictly through action with the words muted. The words accentuate what is on screen but are not necessary to understand it. There are large stretches of scenes when Ophelia is completing her tasks or watching the world around her where not much dialogue is spoken and the storytelling is largely done through the exaggerated actions of the characters on screen and the environment around them. To aid in this type of storytelling, the actor and mime Doug Jones has been sought out by Del Toro for many of his projects.
Speaking of Doug Jones, let's take a second to appreciate this man's range.
He was Abe Sapien in Hellboy, the Faun and Pale Man in Pan's Labyrinth, and even the body of some of the spirits in Crimson Peak.
He doesn't speak Spanish, but he learned the Faun's lines and their meaning in Spanish so he could play the character better. Unfortunately, they did wind up dubbing over him with a Spanish stage actor, but who could blame him when the guy kind of sounds like the voice of the earth itself?
Tened paciencia. Pronto pasearemos por los 7 patios concéntricos de vuestro palacio.
The unique look and feel is also there in what seems to be his personal mission to bring back the classic creature feature and gothic films. His Bleak House is dotted with statues of old-fashioned monsters whose influence on his creations in the shape of Water or Kronos, a film that is essentially a classic vampire monster movie, are undeniable. He has an aversion to using only computer-generated effects and prefers to achieve whatever he can with practical ones first. In a cinema landscape that is oversaturated with computer-generated imagery, his models for monsters and backgrounds stand out. Perhaps this is why, divorced from the time period the films are set in, the look of the creatures in these films still gives them a very old-school feel. The 2015 film Crimson Peak is a living, breathing recreation of the classic Gothic style, with moments straight out of a monster movie. In it, the main character Edith marries the mysterious Englishman Thomas Sharp, and after the tragic death of her father, returns with Thomas to his lonely family manor, colloquially referred to as Crimson Peak because of the red clay that comes up through the ground in winter. This Gothic love story is a send-up of a largely left-behind genre and tells the same old narrative Del Toro loves. Like the director himself, Edith is a largely unwilling immigrant to England instead of America from her home country after a tragedy befell her father. The country seemed hostile to her despite its many beautiful and even familiar trappings. She has become othered despite her own warmth and loving embrace of it in the people who live there. She is used by the Sharps and they intend to toss her to the side like they have so many women before her. Viewers seeking a horror movie like we know today will be disappointed. But those who've seen photos of the Bleak House or heard Del Toro speak of his love for old Gothic stories will love it. It is a sad love story filled with dread and drenched with blood set in a cold and lonely but picturesque place. And it is almost entirely unique in its production in the last decade because of the perfect storm of influence that created it. Guillermo del Toro seems to be part of a small class of filmmakers because of his ability to shift through genres and languages and historical settings. His innate understanding of the political situation in Francoist Spain comes off just as genuine as Cold War-era United States. His bombastic, giant robot and monster fighting movie Pacific Rim is completely different from the quiet, creeping dread of Crimson Peak. And yet somehow, his handprint on both is still obviously there.
His life and work outside the Hollywood system has given him a unique impact on the industry. It has allowed him to create such a wide variety of work that it is strange to see him often simply classified as a horror director. In much the same way that author Stephen King is classified as a horror writer, despite much of his work not really fitting into that genre. I found a great quote about Del Toro's work in a paper that I read for this video.
In the United States, Del Toro is regarded for his works of horror and fantasy, which are heavily ingrained with malformed and monstrous beauty. He is an eccentric who is obsessed with demonic characters, insectile and religious imagery, elements of Catholicism, labyrinths, underworld and clockwork patterns, and other things that do not fully conform to the standards of Mexican, Spanish, or American films in general.
The value of a varied perspective in any industry is impossible to quantify. In much the same way that it is impossible to quantify the influence of a single person on a major industry. That being said, the career of Guillermo del Toro is a testament to the value of diverse international influence on the creative process. He and directors like him bring something to their audience that they cannot get anywhere else. And I just think that's neat. This video began its life as a paper that I wrote for an international film class, but I changed it a lot to make it less boring and academic to put it up here. I'd like to thank my friends Chanel and Red 5 for helping me on the edits. Red 5 has a recent video essay about race in the Dark Souls universe that I cannot recommend enough. It takes you on a journey. Instead of the usual like and subscribe thing, I would ask that you go check his video out. I will put a link to it in the description. If you want to support what I do here, you can go to patreon.com/writingwomen, where you can subscribe for as little as $2 a month. You will get access to stuff like behind the scenes content, updates on video progress, and even some video extras that I cut out of the final product. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but I also have a Twitter. It's just Nikomakiri. It was something else, and then I changed it back to Nikomakiri. I was trying to change my personal brand. Nikomakiri has been my username for everything since I was like 13, and I was like, I'm gonna try something else, and I can't do it. It's not me. So Nikomakiri it is forever. I'm fairly active on Twitter. And I have started doing social media shout outs for new pledges, starting with the most recent one, which was a shout out for my newest $10 tier patron, Olivia, and my newest $2 tier patron, Mark. So hello guys, thank you for subscribing. I really appreciate it. I was able to buy a new ring light, which is why this video looks so much better than the other stuff that I have filmed with my webcam. So it looks really great. I have also been able to get a new microphone, so this video hopefully sounds a lot better. Hopefully some of the white noise is out of it. So yeah, that's what my patrons' money is going to. Thanks guys. I'm going to be uploading a video about my editing process, I think, to my Patreon for this video, so look out for that, guys. And also, thank you to my current patrons: Mary Doc Brandybuck, Ms. Psycho, Amy Chu, aka the Doctor, Lord Butterbutt, Bruce, Red, Kirsten, and again, thank you to Olivia and Mark. Welcome to the family.